The bell rang, echoing through the quiet classroom like a judge's gavel. It was the start of another long day, but for some students, it was more than just another lesson. It was survival. Ms. Grayson, the strictest teacher in the entire school, paced at the front of the class, her sharp heels clicking against the polished floor. Her reputation was built on discipline, perfection, and an unshakable belief that intelligence had to be earned through struggle. She had little patience for students who didn't fit her mold. Her sharp eyes scanned the room, searching for a weakness, a student who wasn't meeting her impossibly high expectations. That's when her gaze settled on Emma. Emma was the quiet girl, the kind who never raised her hand, never spoke out of turn, and never dared to challenge authority. She sat in the back, her long hair falling over her face, as she scribbled in her notebook. Other students barely noticed her, but Ms. Grayson did. To the teacher, Emma's silence wasn't intelligence. It was defiance, and defiance needed to be broken. "Emma," Ms. Grayson called out, her voice slicing through the room. "Stand up!" The room went still. A few students exchanged nervous glances, knowing what was coming. Emma slowly rose from her seat, her hands clutching the edges of her notebook. "You've been in my class for months," Ms. Grayson continued, folding her arms. "And yet, I can't recall a single moment where you've contributed anything meaningful to our discussions." Emma's heart pounded. She hated attention. The last thing she wanted was to be the focus of Ms. Grayson's wrath. "So, Ms. Grayson said, tapping her fingers on her desk, "since you seem to enjoy hiding in the shadows, let's see how much you've actually learned. Answer this." She grabbed a piece of chalk and scribbled a complex equation on the board. A question no one in the class had been able to solve yet. The students held their breath. It was a trick question, the kind that could humiliate someone who wasn't prepared. Ms. Grayson smiled, expecting Emma to crumble under pressure. But Emma simply looked at the board. For a few long moments, she remained silent. Then, without hesitation, she stepped forward, picked up a piece of chalk, and began writing. The classroom was dead silent as her hand moved swiftly, solving the problem with effortless precision. When she finally stepped back, the correct answer stared back at them. Not only had she solved it, she had done so faster and more efficiently than anyone else. Ms. Grayson's smile vanished. Emma turned, her voice quiet but steady. "Is that correct?" For the first time, the teacher had no response. And in that moment, the entire class realized something that Ms. Grayson had refused to see. The quiet girl wasn't weak. She wasn't clueless. She was the smartest person in the room. But Ms. Grayson wasn't about to let that go unchallenged. If Emma thought one correct answer was enough to prove herself, she was about to learn the hard way. Ms. Grayson wasn't finished with her yet. The classroom remained frozen in silence. Emma stood still, gripping the chalk, her heartbeat steady, despite the stares burning into her. Ms. Grayson's expression flickered, just for a second, but she quickly masked it with a tight-lipped smile. "Well," she said, her voice laced with forced composure. "That was unexpected." A few students exchanged glances. Some were impressed, others confused. And then there were those who had never really paid attention to Emma before. Until now. Emma didn't reply. She simply nodded, as if solving that problem had been the easiest thing in the world, because for her, it had been. Ms. Grayson, however, wasn't about to let this go. She wasn't the kind of teacher who enjoyed being caught off guard, especially by a student she had dismissed as unremarkable. She turned back to the board, her mind racing. "All right, let's try something more challenging," she said, grabbing the chalk again. This time, she wrote a much more advanced equation. one that even the top students in the class had struggled with before. She stepped back, arms crossed. "Solve this." Emma glanced at the board. A few students whispered among themselves, wondering if she would back down, but she didn't. Without a word, she stepped forward and picked up the chalk. The moment she started writing, it became clear. She wasn't just solving it. She was breaking it down step by step, explaining each part as if it were second nature to her. And then once again, she finished. The correct answer sat there, undeniable. Ms. Grayson's fingers curled slightly against her palm. The room wasn't silent anymore. A few students murmured, nudging each other, their eyes wide with realization. "Whoa, she's actually a genius. I thought she never paid attention. I've never even seen her talk this much before." Emma placed the chalk down gently and turned. "Is that right?" she asked again, her voice even. Ms. Grayson forced a tight nod. "Yes," she admitted, but her eyes said something else. Emma had embarrassed her, not in an intentional, disrespectful way, but by proving her wrong, by showing that intelligence wasn't just about who spoke, the loudest or answered the most questions in class. And for someone like Ms. Grayson, that was unacceptable. The days that followed were different. The other students began noticing Emma more. Some asked her for help with their homework. Others whispered about her when they thought she wasn't listening. But the biggest change came from Ms. Grayson herself. It started small. Extra questions directed at Emma in class, more complicated than what the rest of the students received. Then came the sudden quizzes, always with material just slightly ahead of what they had learned. But Emma met every challenge. Each time she answered correctly. Each time she remained calm. And each time she saw the flicker of frustration in Ms. Grayson's eyes. One afternoon, after another perfectly answered question, Ms. Grayson finally snapped. "Stay after class," she ordered as the bell rang. The other students glanced at Emma, some with concern, others with curiosity, but Emma didn't protest. She simply waited as the room emptied, until it was just her and Ms. Grayson. The teacher sat at her desk, staring at Emma for a long moment before speaking. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Emma blinked, caught off guard by the sudden hostility. "I don't think I'm anything," she answered truthfully. Ms. Grayson leaned forward. "You enjoy making a fool of me." Emma frowned. "No." "Then why do you do it?" Emma hesitated. I just answer the questions." Ms. Grayson scoffed. "Don't play innocent. You were perfectly content being invisible. And now suddenly, you want to prove a point." Emma was quiet for a moment before responding. "I never wanted to prove anything," she said softly. "You asked the questions. I answered them. That's all." Ms. Grayson studied her, searching for any trace of arrogance, but there was none. Emma wasn't mocking her. She wasn't trying to show off. She was simply existing, and that infuriated Ms. Grayson even more. "I don't like arrogance in my classroom," she said sharply. Emma tilted her head slightly. "I don't think intelligence is arrogance." Ms. Grayson stiffened. For the first time, the teacher had no real argument, because deep down, she knew Emma was right. But admitting that meant admitting she had been wrong about Emma all along. And Ms. Grayson wasn't ready for that. She exhaled, collecting herself. "You can go," she said curtly. Emma hesitated, then nodded and turned to leave. But as she reached the door, Ms. Grayson's voice stopped her. "You think you figured everything out," the teacher said. "But let's see how you handle real pressure." Emma paused, but didn't turn around. A storm was coming, and Ms. Grayson wasn't done testing her yet. The tension in the air lingered long after Emma left the classroom. She could feel it the way Ms. Grayson's words clung to her. heavy and unshakable. Real pressure. What did that mean? She got her answer the next morning. A surprise test. Not for the whole class, just for her. As soon as she walked in, Ms. Grayson placed a thick stack of papers on her desk. "Since you seem to have all the answers," she said, "let's see how well you do under time constraints. You have 45 minutes." The other students exchanged glances. Some looked almost excited, as if watching a battle unfold. Others seemed uncomfortable, sensing something unfair about the situation. But Emma didn't argue. She simply picked up her pen and started writing. The questions were brutal, far more advanced than anything they had covered. It was clear Ms. Grayson had spent extra time crafting this test, determined to prove Emma wasn't as capable as she seemed. And yet, as the minutes ticked by, Emma's expression remained calm. Her pencil moved swiftly, her focus unwavering. She wasn't just answering. She was working through each problem with precision, as if her mind thrived on the challenge. Ms. Grayson watched from her desk, arms crossed. She had expected hesitation, struggle, maybe even frustration, but Emma didn't falter. By the time the bell rang, Emma had finished every single question. She set her pencil down and slid the paper forward. Ms. Grayson took it without a word, but there was a sharpness in her eyes, a reluctant curiosity. The class emptied, and Emma walked out, her heart steady. She didn't know what Ms. Grayson would do next, but she had a feeling this battle wasn't over. The next day, when she walked into the classroom, something was different. There was no smug challenge on Ms. Grayson's face, no sharp remarks. Instead, she simply stood at the front of the room, holding Emma's test paper. Silence fell over the class. Ms. Grayson's lips pressed into a thin line before she finally spoke. "Perfect score." A few gasps broke out. Others stared at Emma in awe. Ms. Grayson set the paper down carefully. "In all my years of teaching, I've never given a test that no one could trip up on," she said slowly. Until now, Emma remained quiet, waiting. Ms. Grayson took a breath, as if the words she was about to say were difficult to form. "I misjudged you," she admitted. "I assumed that because you were quiet, you weren't paying attention. I was wrong." The classroom was utterly still. No one had ever heard Ms. Grayson admit she was wrong. Emma looked at her, reading between the lines. Ms. Grayson hadn't just been testing her knowledge. She had been testing her resilience. And now, finally, she understood. Emma met her teacher's gaze, and with quiet confidence, said, "I never needed to prove anything. I just wanted to learn." Something in Ms. Grayson's expression shifted. It wasn't defeat. It was respect. From that day forward, things changed. Ms. Grayson was still strict, but she no longer underestimated Emma and the rest of the class. They started seeing her differently too. Not as the quiet girl in the back, but as someone worth paying attention to. Emma hadn't set out to challenge anyone. She had simply stayed true to herself. And in the end, that had been enough.